Hi friends, it's Unicorn, and would you believe it? We are almost halfway into the year and it's time for the June TBR. I'm very excited for this TBR because not only I have books planned for Tajikistan for the From and About Asia project, I also have some books that I have been anticipating reading for the Pride month, and also some books that has been sitting on my shelf for longer or shorter period of time that I'm really eager to go into. So now, without further ado, let's dive into the books. First of all, I want to talk about the 4 books that I'm gonna read for Tajikistan for the From and About Asia reading project. The first book is called The City Where Dreams Come True by Gulsifat Shakhidi. This is one of the few books I can find are written by Tajikistan authors which are also accessible. It is so hard to find books by authors from Tajikistan because it only has been independent since the dissolve of the Soviet Union, and before that the history of all the Central Asia countries kind of blend in together and it's very hard to distinguish. This is a collection of 4 stories set during the Civil War, which happened after Tajikistan first became independent in the early 90s. The stories go through generations and really showed us some insight about how the war happened and what that influenced people. It says that this is a very emotional packed book because it tackles on the topics like loss, injustice, and violence, but it also talks about how people are looking forward to the new opportunities, looking forward to survive and to peaceful future. And that's the only book I can find for reading prompt number 1, which is read a book by Tajikistan authors. But I do have 3 more books planned for this project for reading prompt number 2, which is to read a book about the culture of Tajikistan or the culture of Central Asia. The first of which being Tajikistan's Difficult Development Path by Martha Brill Olcott. As we know, Tajikistan is a landlocked country, meaning that there's no oceans around the country, and also the people in Tajikistan are very diverse culturally. So after it became independent, the society is facing a lot of challenges politically, economically, and socialized. This book recounts the Tajikistan's leadership commitments to the country and also questioned their consistency. It pointed out the dilemma that the leadership is facing between complete reform and a continuance of the current policy. As you guys know, I'm all in for a political nonfiction to figure out how the country works, so I'm really excited for this. I hope it will give me some insight of how Tajikistan functions as a country. Next book is more focused on the history. It's called The Birth of Tajikistan by Paul Bergne. As the title suggested, this book is of course about the birth of Tajikistan, but it dated back to 1917 when Russian Revolution broke out, and talking about how when Soviet Union take over all the countries in Central Asia. It talks about the nation's identity historically, but also continues with its development and also discuss the nation's identity of our current time. I know very few things about the history of Central Asia countries, and I actually have to admit that I know very few things about Soviet Union. So I want to see what their impact on other countries that we know today and what the history tells us about it. The last book on Tajikistan is just a book called Tajikistan by Colleen. This is a book that I didn't include in my Tajikistan reading list because I forgot to check my library catalog. I cannot believe I forgot that, but after the video is posted, I went to my library and just simply input Tajikistan and this book popped up. So I think I will go back to that video and maybe add this book to description box or something, but as of current time, I have placed a hold on this book and wanted to read it. This book is part of a very large series talking about Islam culture in different countries, and Tajikistan being one of them. It's more about general information of the country, the land, the people, the culture, the history, and also the relationship it has with other nations. I think this will be a very good overview and in general a very good introduction to Tajikistan as a country that I'm not that familiar with. Then for Pride Month, I have 2 books I have saved/planned for this month that I'm really excited about. The first one is Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. This book is a collection of interviews, cultural criticism, essays, and also part memoir about the author, talking about what does it mean of being asexual in our society and what does asexuality reveals about things like consent, our culture, and social structure. The book invites us to think about big picture questions through the lens of asexuality. I have a lot of loose ideas about asexuality and also about its impact on people, on our society, but I feel like the ideas are more like dots on a paper that they don't connect with each other. So I'm hoping to learn a lot from this book structurally and also connect my ideas and to make my knowledge of it more structured. This book is highly recommended by some of my asexual friends, and I'll also be rating it with Shannon from That's So Paul, who rate way more diverse than me, so I'm looking forward to learn a lot from this book and also learn a lot from Shannon. And the second book for Pride Month is The Queen's English, the LGBTQIA plus Dictionary of Lingo and Colloquial Phrases by Chloe O. Davis. This is a book I picked up last year after I saw Cousin talking about it on her channel Always Doing, who by the way also rates way more diverse than me, and I learned a lot from her. And this is a book about the queer terminology, which I'm not familiar with all of them, so I'm hoping to learn a lot from it. It's a very joyful, visualized book to look at, and it's very colorful. I think this is one of the books that is very delightful just to flip through it. But also, the problem with books like these is you don't really think that you need to read it from back to back, and sometimes maybe you'll treat it more like a coffee table book. But in June, I'm gonna challenge myself to read it back to back because I just want to learn. I don't think I'll remember everything because it's literally a dictionary, but I'll try my best and aiming to broaden my structures for my queer theories. Next up is also a very exciting book. It's not only exciting because I'm really eager to read it, but also because if I were to read it, that means I have finished reading the book on this project prior to this book. So the book I finished is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, as you can see on my vlog. But I'm gonna continue with my Penguin English large book collection, reading Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. If you didn't know, I'm reading my Penguin English Library collection this year from The Longest Book, and before this book there were two other very long books that I have finished, and this one is the third longest one. Wives and Daughters has been on my TBR for like 3 months. I just wasn't doing very good at reading, but I finally read that and loved it. And moving on to Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. I mean, this is a Bronte novel, so for sure it's gonna be a masterpiece, but also I've heard that this book specifically is a revolutionary novel. It says during the Industrial Depression resulting from the Napoleonic War and centered around two protagonists. One is called Caroline, who is shy and who is trapped in a oppressive atmosphere, and also about Shirley, who is vivacious and also inherited a large amount of assets. I know that this book makes Shirley a girl's name because before this book, Shirley was a name that meant to be using on boys, so we can see how influential this book is. But besides that, I don't really know much about this book because when you read the synopsis of a classic, they tend to spoil everything and you're like, oh damn. So I didn't really read anything about this book. I just know that it's a revolutionary novel by Charlotte Bronte. And then I have some other books that I have picked out and put them on top of my priority for June. The first one is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, translated by Ann Goldstein. This is a so very popular book that I have owned for many years. Actually, this is the first book of the Napolitan novels. I have owned the series for many years, but I have no idea why I didn't pick them up before. But now I think it is time, and also I'll admit that I want to watch the TV show, so it only makes sense for me to read the books first. This is a book, as the title suggested, about friendship. We have two protagonists, and also throughout their story we can also see how the neighborhood and also the culture, the city and the country transformed, and how the changes also transforms their friendship. Nothing too much to add to this introduction of this book. All I've heard about this book is that it is a brilliant book and I have to read it. Second to the last book in this TBR is the heaviest one. It is Obedience to Authority, an experimental view by Stanley Milgram. This is a book about the experiment of a class study that Stanley ran many years ago. He asked a lot of people to perform electric shocks to human learners, and gradually the performers need to increase the level of the electric shock so they will become more painful and more powerful. But instead of studying the human learners, this is actually an experiment that studies the performance of the shocks to see that to what extent people will still obey authority figures no matter the consequences. This is a very old experiment, but also a very timely read for me because I feel like in our days, a lot of people are blindly follow a lot of figures, leaders, political-wise, like technology-wise, and also even cult leaders, and don't really think too much about the consequences or the causes of the issues. And I just want to learn it from a more systematic and also a more psychological side. The last book in this video is A Man Called Uwe by Fredrik Backman. Fredrik Backman is one of my favorite writers, or one of my favorite contemporary writers at least. I have read 2.5 of his books, with the half books being Anxious People, and I loved them all. But nothing wrong with Anxious People, it's just my bad reading habit that make me put that book down for no reason, and I already forgot what happened. I should probably go back and finish that book actually. But I do want to read A Man Called Uwe this month just because this is the most beloved work by him. I have not yet read it, and this is a book apparently about a man called Uwe, obviously. And he's not a very pleasant man to get along with. He is a little bit difficult to deal with. I have a brief idea about what this book is about and how the story will go because the Chinese translation about the movie adaptation, the Chinese title kind of spoiled the story a little bit, so I didn't research further. I just know that it's written by Fredrik Backman and it's loved by so many people, and it's a book that I'm supposed to read many years ago. But yeah, I'm gonna fix that in June. And that's all the books I got for my June TBR. Please let me know if you have read or heard any of them and what do you think of them. And also let me know what books do you plan to read in June, and don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you enjoyed it. I wish you happy reading, stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!